More than 187,000 students, according to the Washington Post newspaper. That's the number of students in the United States who've been exposed to gun violence since 1999. In April of that year, 13 students and teachers were killed in a mass shooting at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. There have been countless shootings since, including Newtown, Connecticut, where 20 first graders at Sandy Hook Elementary School were killed, along with 6 of their teachers. The students from Parkland, Florida, make up a generation who've never known a world without school shootings. Let's get back to our panel right now. And Megan, I want to start with you. You want to respond to something that Paul was saying.
Yes, Paul just used the word individual when describing the profile of a shooter, and I just want to emphasize that the individual is not genderless. In the vast majority of these cases, it's a boy or a man. And I think it's important that we emphasize that, because I think that one of the major cultural shifts that's going to have to take place is with regard to masculinity. And I just want to make sure that that's part of this discussion as well.
That's right, Paul, isn't it? The shooters have been men or boys.
100%, 100% correct. 100% correct. And I also agree with the collateral comment on that. There are certainly things that we have to do to address the correlation between a young man or an older man, however old they are, correlating their behavior and the sense of power, the sense of control, or the sense of authority by the use of a weapon. So there's no question, I agree 100%.
Megan, when we look at gun ownership in the United States, I mean, there are 300 million guns in the United States. That's almost one gun for every man, woman, and child in this country. And here we have a situation, given the Second Amendment, where it's not an either-or situation. It's not a case of you either have guns or you don't have guns. We know that there are going to be guns in the United States. The question is, under what control do they fall? We're not going to have a Japanese situation where it's almost impossible to get a gun.
Exactly.
The bar is set very high. So, that being the case, where should the line be drawn?
I think that that's a really challenging question. One of the things that I would like to see is the closing of the gun show loophole, which means that at least in Virginia, you can buy an AR-15 without a background check for cash at a gun show. And I don't know that that meets the definition of a responsible gun owner or a well-regulated militia. And
the type of guns, I guess.
Yeah.
Because in this country, you get hold of semi-automatic weapons. You can get a very easy fix on those weapons to make them automatic weapons again. Those should be banned, in your view, should they?
I would love to see the assault weapons ban come back, but again, that doesn't take any of those weapons out of circulation. The ones that are already, in private ownership those wouldn't disappear. But I think that certainly I can't conceive of a reason why anyone would need a weapon like that.
Right. Paul, I just want to get your view on the whole question of background checks, mental health screening and things. Do they work?
Well, they do if they're valid and reliable. And then unfortunately what we have is neither valid nor reliable. With any problem-solving situation that we encounter, whatever it may be, we look for common denominators. Now, we know that the gun is clearly a common denominator with respect to this type of violence. But what's behind the gun is someone, and this isn't a broad statement against people with mental health issues. This is a direct statement, myopically put, focusing on the actual shooter and the percentage of those shooters that have mental health problems. And so that is something that we really need to be taking a much stronger look at, because when you look at the background check side of this thing, these aren't people typically with criminal histories. I remember when I was covering Parkland, the very first thing that we took a look at was, what is this guy's priors? In every situation we look at, what is this guy's priors? Typically there aren't any. But what is common, what is the connecting point, is the fact that they have deep-rooted mental health issues. That's the part of screening that I will always stand by, regardless of the opposition. We've got 30 million people that we know of in the United States on antipsychotic medication. That's a problem. We need to be much more selective as to the type of weapons people have, and clearly, the people that get to hold on to them.
Tom, in the immediate aftermath of the Parkland shootings, we heard of some solutions to the crisis. I'm not sure how well thought out these solutions were, but President Trump, for instance, said that one of the things that should be done is that we should arm teachers in school. What did you make of that?
No, that's a horrible idea. Well, I mean, arm them. Yeah, arm them with the knowledge and the tools that they need to be able to talk to the kids. I mean, here in Colorado, we have 1 in 500 of a counselor to talk to these kids to figure out day-to-day life. And that, I mean, this, how can you get to that many kids? So they should figure out a way to keep the guns from coming into the school. I mean, we know that 60% of these school shootings, these kids have acquired, the firearm, from a family member or a cousin, uncle, something like that. I mean, 2 days later, that one in Maryland, he got the gun from his father. He came into school, shot his ex-girlfriend, and then he got shot. And so now he's traumatized the resource center service provider, that officer. He gets killed. The girl ends up, dying, and has traumatized the entire school because of that. And all it would have taken is for Dad to lock up his firearm before he left for work in the morning.
What did you make of that suggestion, Megan, that school teachers be armed? I mean, there was even another suggestion afterwards made by a former U.S. senator who said that we shouldn't worry about the guns. Children should learn CPR. Yes,
I think it's the worst idea I could imagine. And as an educator who's been in a school shooting, I can't say how awful I think that idea is. It strikes me as just unconscionable that a teacher should be expected to kill a child. What does that say to students about how much we value them? It's a terrible, as Tom said, it's an unconscionable idea.
Marcus, if we look at other countries, one example that's often cited is Australia. There was a horrific shooting in Australia, in Tasmania actually, when 35 people were killed. Shortly after that shooting, amid the outrage in the country, all the states in Australia passed some of the most comprehensive gun control laws in the world. That was in 1996. Since then, there have been no mass shootings in Australia. Isn't that a lesson for the U.S.?
Well, we can learn a lesson from that. If you see two kids playing on the playground and they're fighting with sticks, you don't just let them fight with the sticks, you take them away. And so we're not trying to say we need to take away sticks. We're just basically saying that we need to change our policies. We need to change the way we look at things. Like some other countries like Japan, Australia, yes, they do have a low mass shooting rate because they're not fixated on guns. United States is a gun country. Right. Colorado itself is definitely a gun state due to the hunting. But we're not talking about the hunters. We're talking about the folks who get a hold of these semi-automatic weapons that are military grade, and a lot of people don't know much about them. And so I feel that if we can come to a place where maybe 3-day background check's not enough, maybe it's 7, and maybe the NRA get involved by doing what they're called to do, not be a political action group, but be a group where they help educate people on gun safety. And then also people take a 1-day background check and to make sure that they don't have any mental issues or have had them in the past. And that could be a step in the right direction. Although be it a small one, in a big ocean, it's just a drop. But at the same time, we have to move forward. We have to figure something out, so these things are going to keep on happening, and we can't afford to lose any more Sullivans, any more Weavers, any of those people.
Paul, that's an important point that Marcus raised there. America is a gun country. Isn't that the biggest challenge here? I mean, this is the country with the Second Amendment. Australia, for instance, doesn't have a Second Amendment. Right. Gun ownership and the gun culture, it's more or less built into the American DNA, isn't it? I mean, how difficult is it going to be to break that mindset?
Well, think about it. Marcus is 100% on point. We're not going to change that culture. And we can talk about this all day long. We are simply not going to change the culture that speaks to a sense of entitlement about firearms. We are going to be able to modify it. We're going to trim it down. And I believe we'll get there. But our culture speaks to that. So as much as I applaud what Australia did there and what Japan has done, we're not them, and that's not going to happen here. What we need to do, and I agree with what everybody was saying earlier, especially about the issue of arming teachers. I mean, what are we thinking here? Why don't we arm teachers with what they need? How about the proper support to educate the way they need to educate, the materials that they simply don't have? I mean, let's arm them with that. Let's arm them with the information so they can understand the behavioral science, so they can modify or they could manage this preemptively and report it preemptively. Let's arm them with the information they need. Putting firearms in their hands, I think, is an absurd idea. And that is not a strike against our teachers. It's an applaud to our teachers. They shouldn't have to do that.
Marcus, I've just got about a minute left, and I have to ask you this. You were shot and wounded. A friend of yours was killed in that shooting. Do you have any kind of legal recourse, or does the law protect gun owners more than they do people who are in these public spaces where they get shot?
Well, in the case of, the Aurora Theater, there were several of us who did take it to the federal level as far as suing the theater for safety. Obviously, when we were at that theater tonight, they did have a lack of safety. No one went around to check the doors. If they would have, they would discover that one of the doors was open, that the shooter came through and then cowardly shot at the crowd. And so my view on that is that it's called the Limited Liability Act that they have in Colorado, where business aren't responsible if something happens in their place. And so my thoughts on that is we need to look at public safety, not just in movie theaters, but also the malls. Also, the same thing that happened in Vegas, at concerts, at different public places. And so, it took a while for us to change, with the civil rights movement, but don't get me wrong, I don't compare the two together, but we're moving in that direction, as you can see. And a lot of that civil rights energy is really starting to be focused on with the youth. And so, the youth will lead us, and I feel that a change will come.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.